So welcome everyone to today's Ask the Expert series. This is the second one in this series. The last one was on software programming and product development with the CEC. And today we're lucky enough to have John Reno Jackson and Kerri-Anne Chisholm today here to talk about fine arts careers in Cayman. So a little background about Connect. If you're new and haven't been on one of our webinars as yet, we recently just launched in March our new social enterprise that's completely geared towards helping individuals in Cayman achieve career success. So whether that be do webinars like this and having the community learn more about the different industries there are on island, or if that's one-on-one helping you with your own career action plans. So we're super excited to have John Reno here and Kerri-Anne, and I'm going to pass it over to them to introduce themselves.
Who wants to start? Me?
Rock, paper, scissors.
All right. Wow. All right. So so my name is John Reno Jackson. I'm a multidisciplinary artist based in Grand Cayman, or the Cayman Islands. And my practice mainly revolves around playing with ideas of memories and identity.
Hello, I'm Kerri-Anne Chisholm. So I'm usually based in the UK, but now based in Cayman and kind of between the UK and Cayman. So I'm a curator, focusing on social justice, looking at post-colonial legacies, and kind of thinking about kind of community connection through the arts. Yeah, that's what I do.
Great. So for everyone who's online now, feel free to ask as many questions as possible. The point of the Ask the Expert series is really for you all to have the opportunity to ask the expert any question you may have about the industry itself. So just to start off, how did you both get into the arts?
Oh, sorry, huh?
No, you go.
So I kind of fell into the National Gallery when I was doing my work experience when I was in high school, like yonks ago, and was like, oh, this place exists. What is this? What does it do? Has it always been here? And then I went and studied fine art because I love drawing. And I was like, oh, I'm just going to go and draw. I just want to be an artist that draws. And then I'll probably go into fashion. And then I kind of stumbled into the world of kind of exhibition making and curation. And that's, yeah, I think from there, it was just like, this is where I belong. Yeah.
Cool.
Right, Reno?
I think I'm exactly the same. Other than I didn't fall into the National Gallery, I just kind of fell into it. I think that a lot of the avenues for making art and having that as a practice in Cayman professionally are kind of limited. I think that most sort of education things, they kind of say, well, maybe you should do something else. Maybe you should stay away from it. But I think that there is a viable career choice in doing it. And I think that it benefits the community as well. So yeah, I kind of just fell into it as well and just kept going. And luckily I had a good enough support system to keep going.
I just want to jump in. Did you have, because I know that when I was at university, a lot of people said to me, oh, what are you going to do with drawing? What are you going to do with fine art? Mm-hmm. Can you make a career out of that? How are you going to feed yourself? And that's a lot of questions that I think that we have to think about as creatives when you kind of start on this journey, is how to answer those questions. And if you even need to answer those questions to people.
True. Yeah, no, I had a lot of those questions. I mean, a lot of uncles and aunts and stuff saying, well, I was actually talking about this to someone, like, I think yesterday. And it's just, everybody tries to direct you to not pursue it. And I think you brought up a good thing at the end of what you said, is like, why do you even feel the need to answer that? It should be something like, if you become a doctor, no one's going to say, why are you becoming a doctor? No one's going to say that. Yeah. So I think that there needs to be sort of, I think it just takes education and time of people becoming more aware that it is a potential job, and there's jobs out there for it. So.
Yeah, definitely. And that's why we're doing sessions like these, right? Exactly for that reason, so that more people can become aware and have the knowledge of the viable careers in Cayman, right? Yeah. So back onto that. So did you both do arts growing up in schools? Like, did you do it in elementary school, high school, or did you really find your passion once you went to university?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Start.
I'll go this time. All right. So basically, I think that you learn art through all of school. I think that it's more of like a kinetic sort of class where they teach you about like how colors can be different, kind of like, you know, what they do in kindergarten and stuff. And I think it graduates slowly and they start to see who might be more interested in art. But even at the end of it all, there's always a push away from it. It's always like a class that's considered as a filler class, like doing gym or something like that. It's like, oh, well, you know, you did art for a little bit, or like music or something like that. It's just one of those kind of classes that you add to your repertoire. So that way, when you go to university or apply to university, you're more likely to get in because it's like, oh, this person can paint and do business at the same time. Like they must be a genius. So, you know, yeah. Left side, right side. Whoa. You know? So I think that, yeah, I mean, we were exposed to it. I mean, I was, but I don't know if, you know, it really benefited me per se.
Yeah, I think, which is a funny thing. So growing up, my mother was a fashion designer. My father was kind of into woodwork and metalworks, and they're both quite creative. But they both had businesses. So for me, business was like a thing that like, I just understood businesses inside and out. And I just kind of thought, I'm going to do something in business. And I actually really disliked my art class in high school, just because it was so limited, the materials. We did have art teachers that tried to like expand, but it was, I mean, yeah, I think the explosion came out, like going to museums wasn't a thing that you did apart from like, you know, visiting the National Museum actually, and kind of seeing history, but not the creative side of things. So I really didn't enjoy art in school, which is interesting. And it was more of just kind of just being in the right place at the right time, which sounds so strange, but like just stepping through the gallery really randomly because someone was like, oh, this thing is happening. I was like, where? And it just happened to be on the way that I was driving with my mother to something on a Saturday, and we walked in and I was like, oh, there's a whole place that does stuff like that. I don't know, you know, it's like a weird thing to think about when you're a teenager. You know, I was like almost 16 or 17, and it's like I'd never walked into an art gallery in Cayman. I'd never thought about that whole side of things.
Yeah, true.
So what do you both do now? So in your practice, what kind of style are you working on? I mean, have you curated anything recently, Kerri-Anne? I know you just had the biennial going on, so tell us a little bit about what you're doing currently.
So I was one of the curators for the biennial, so the second Cayman Islands biennial, that's hosted mainly by the National Gallery, and that was so much fun, but really intensive work. So that's something that I do part-time. Well, I did part-time in this instant. Well, it was full-time part-time. And kind of working with over 40 artists. So I think there's like 41 or 42 artists that are in the show. And that is a huge project to undertake. But in terms of thinking about my curatorial practice, or my practice as a cultural practitioner, if you want to say it in that sense, is being a facilitator, and it's connecting people with art. It's instigating conversations that are deeper than just, oh, look at this painting, it looks great. Is it a painting that's literal, or is it more abstract? But actually addressing things, like I said earlier, like post-colonial legacy. So thinking about, you know, being a colony in the Caribbean, and what does that mean now? Thinking about identity, thinking about politics in terms of politics of space, politics of place, politics of identity, politics of, yeah. So a lot of what I do is more around kind of social mobility and having difficult conversations that enable social mobility. And within that, so at the moment, I'm also doing a PhD, and that's kind of the main focus of the PhD, is how can we use exhibition spaces that are both in the institution, but also outside of the institution, to instigate a lot of those conversations that are in a positive way that will actually bring about change. So if I was to sum it up, that change is why I'm a curator.
True. I agree with that. I think that art through activism is a very important thing, or activism through art, either way you look at it. I think that, I mean, you can look at something for its aesthetic value, but I think that considering the placement of where you showcase the work or how the materials were made or whatever it is, if you start to think about the context of all of these things, like who created these materials or where were they primarily used? And it goes much deeper than that, just kind of scraping the surface on like just materiality, but that's just one aspect of how you can push an art form from just being about, oh, well, I really like how this looks, or, oh, it makes me feel good, which is, those are two very valid, important things in looking at a piece of art. But most, I think one of the things that, again, education-wise is limited in Cayman, and what I would love to see developed in schools rather than just here's how to draw and here's how to paint, is like maybe more of an art appreciation and the understanding of like the aspects that go into art. I mean, I'm kind of like a budding curator, I guess, so to speak. Like I'm not Kerri, but I've had to curate most of my own shows because there's a lack of galleries in Cayman. And I mean, that's not like a myth or anything, it's just true. And I think that it's just really interesting to see all of the aspects that go into planning a show. So it's not an easy feat, but if you're a really creative person and you can put two and two together, it's a very rewarding job, I think. And it also can bring more value to the artwork and more value to the viewer. So like not value monetary wise, but I guess meaning. What do you say?
Yeah, and I think there's like, with what you said, there's a few things that come out from that. And I think one of the main things is that there are kind of two different ways to curate. Well, there's many different ways to curate, but there's kind of two distinct ways to curate. And you have one that you think about the aesthetics, you think about the conversations that artworks have with each other, the conversations that visitors will have with the artworks as they come through a space. So thinking about that spatial awareness. And then you also have the theoretical side of curating as well. So kind of thinking about deeper conversations and dialogues that are going to be kind of brought out from that. And I think that there's a few things when we think about education and awareness in schools in Cayman and about arts, about curating and I think that the key thing is understanding the aesthetical value of art and like being able to appreciate it and being able to make work that you feel is beautiful, is aesthetically pleasing. But then also balancing that with the theory of kind of art theory, why things are done a certain way in terms of not brushstrokes, but I guess how to pull out certain conversations, how to address certain themes appropriately appropriately is a loose term that I use, but through. And I think that that's something that we currently don't have. That I don't see is having that balance between the theory and the aesthetics. Because when I was in art class, and that's why I really disliked it, that like one of my art teachers took a pencil or I think a paintbrush and started fixing my artwork. I was like, oh, it's not finished. It doesn't look good yet. And I was like, oh, okay. And because the focus was around how does it look? Does it look pleasing?
True.
Which like you said, there has to be that balance between it. So
yeah, and I was gonna add, I think that even then, to some extent, the role of a curator. So me as an artist, I can paint something aesthetically or paint something from a certain perspective, but I don't have to necessarily look into all of the sort of societal and social placements of my work. The curator's job also is to help assist me by helping to look into all of that stuff to give context to the work. So I think a lot of people feel intimidated by this stuff and they say, oh, that's just hoity-toity stuff, like, but why can't it just be like, it's pretty? But the role, one of the most things I respect about curators the most is that they look into the why of like the process of why it was made, and they can develop a narrative that is based around the personal experience of the artist, but then it also reflects into like a greater sociological issue or like something narrative. So Yeah, I think it is an important thing, and I wish there were more, and I think there is more. I think as years go by and this sort of career choice becomes a more readily available option in our country, I think that I think it's just going to develop positively. So
yeah, and I think like what you said definitely is like, the curators and artists have to work really closely together.
Yeah.
And I was speaking to one of my mentors recently, and they were saying to me that essentially curating is like being a book editor, that you get this information that is given all of this text and all these concepts, all of the these stories that are painted to and presented to you, and you just have to kind of figure out what's the best form, what's the best placement, what's the best time that the audience will be able to come in contact with that. And it's basically facilitation. I think the best curators that I can think of historically are those that know how to facilitate dialogues between artists, artworks, and the audience without kind of interrupting that. So yes, you do have to bring in a bit of additive narrative, but it's not distracting too much from what the intentions of the artwork and the artists are, because you're basically a bridge.
Yeah, exactly. A bridge. I think that's the best way to say it.
So for someone, we have a question here. So for someone who's looking to break into the market, or say like they have their current job, right, but they're looking to become more of an artist full time, what would you suggest for them to do to be able to really take that next step?
I guess this is my question then.
Every day you can take this one.
Okay.
I can add my 2 cents afterwards, but it's
So I think that one of the first steps is kind of just taking a leap of faith almost. I think that you don't really know per se what the response is going to be from society until you just do it. And I think that because basically when you make artwork, you're making it for a reason, like let's say you paint still lifes of plants. Why are you choosing to paint these plants? Why are you choosing to do this? It's going to resonate with somebody. So as long as your ability is to withstand, not even, I don't even say that because that's incorrect as well. I think it's just also, the presentation of it. I think going to the next step is really just more about the way you treat it. Like it's a business at the end of the day as well. It's about being professional. If I came on here right now and I was just like, yeah, Hannah, I just paint, like, why are you calling me? So, I don't think that would work like that. So I think it's very important to also treat it like a business, treat it professionally. And, if people see that you treat it professionally, they'll be more responsive to that. So I think that's a really good first step, is just saying, well, I run a business and, I want to be respected as an artist. I want you to see what I make and actually engage with it and respect it as a career. So I think it's how you carry it.
Yeah, and I think there's like 2 important questions that I would say that were questions that I thought of while I was kind of thinking about, whether or not I wanted to be an artist, which I kind of knew from the beginning that I didn't want to be a full-time practicing artist. But it's that thing of, where does your art practice sit? Do you want it to be more of a commercial, sitting kind of within the commercial sphere, that you paint based on commissions, and the main way that you make your profit is selling, and then kind of thinking about, okay, well, how to make yourself, how to find your niche in the market. So thinking about, what would customers want? So you have to think from a very business minded point of view, or do you have the other side of which I think Rena, I think you kind of find, well, from what I know, I feel like you strike that balance really well of, this is the work that I'm passionate about. These are the conversations that I want to have. And then how do I then make that also kind of fit within the commercial side of things? How do I then kind of continue to make a living? So I think that those are kind of 2 big questions of, I think.
Yeah. And that's the hardest part, I think, is finding that balance, because I could easily just wake up tomorrow and paint conch shells and I'd make like $100,000 a year and I could go like live on 7 Mile Beach. But I'm not going to do that to myself. I could be painting turtles and stuff, but I mean, there's nothing wrong with someone that does do that. But what I'm saying is that I personally would paint the way I paint, or make artwork the way I make artwork. And it is really difficult to strike that balance between saleable work and also work that has conceptual and critical sort of, access. But I think really and truthfully, like I said, I think the only way to do it is just practice, steal from other artists, like look into what other artists are doing and just say, well, how can I implement that into my practice, and just keep experimenting while also, making works that are saleable. Test the market. I think the most important thing is just to check the market. Like, what are people willing to spend, and what are people willing to buy for their homes? I mean, I realized that there is a market for abstract art because Bendel Heights was selling from the 80s. So, I mean, there was a place in Randy Chalet and many other people, Gordon Solomon with his, the little, the tiny squares, so those kind of things, they were selling well. And so I said, well, maybe there is a place for me to make abstract art. And then also just know your price. I think a lot of people, they put a personal price on their artwork. They say, well, to me, it's worth $9,000. And realistically, that doesn't make any sense. I mean, not to say that it isn't worth $9,000, because it could be, but it's also just like, if it's your first ever painting you've ever made and you sell it for $9,000, the next time you try to sell a painting and you've dropped the price down to 500, no one's going to trust you. So I think that that's the other very, like, you have to treat it like a business, and you also have to treat it professionally. Because I mean, if you went to Foster's tomorrow and they were selling you milk for $96 a gallon, would you buy it? No, probably not. And then the next day it was back down to $5. You would feel kind of confused, and the people who bought the milk for $96 would feel cheated. So you have to be very conscientious, conscious of the environment, but as well as stay true to what you want to make. So don't ever feel like you have to just make something to make money. It's also about, just finding that balance. It's a really strange balance.
And I think within that, like, one of the things that is really important is research. So looking, like, not just reading about, in like 1800s, this is what artists were doing, but kind of what are artists doing now? What's happening? What are the trends that have happened in terms of art movements? What are the exhibitions that are happening? Or thinking about art fairs, if you're thinking of selling if kind of sales is like your main thing that you're concerned about, what are the art fairs? What's on the market? Artists that are kind of in a similar space, creating work that's similar size, similar materials, and like, how long have they been practicing? What are they selling their artworks for? So these are a lot of the questions that you kind of have to think about. It's not just, oh, I'm going to make a painting, I'm going to sell it for like 9,000.
Yeah, true.
But it's kind of thinking very much business-like what is happening on the market and where do I fit in that market?
Exactly. And then also,
what are you additive? Sorry, what are you adding to the market as well?
What are you adding? Yeah, I was also going to say, but I forgot. So I was listening to you talk and I forgot.
Research? Isn't that research?
No, I think it was something about now I forgot.
It'll come back to you in a bit.
Yeah, it'll come back.
So I know within the arts, you can take many different pathways, right? You can go the formal education route, or you can do residencies, or there are just so many different things you can possibly do, like mentoring, so on and so forth. So can you talk a little bit about your own ways of how you got into the art world? I know, Reno, you've done more residencies, right? And Kerri-Anne, you've done like bachelor's, master's, like the whole.
Well, Kerri, have you ever done a residency?
Mm-hmm.
So,
you've done oh. Nice.
Yeah, so if you can go into a little bit about what if you're currently in school, what are you doing, or how did you get to where you are?
Well, Kerri, you can go first then.
Okay, I feel like, I guess I did that traditional, I did a bachelor's in fine art, and then after doing that, then while studying, I knew that I wanted to go into curating. So I curated kind of like local shows. So I was studying in Oxford at the time. So I did local shows in Oxford. And then when I graduated, then I did a show for Oxford University, and another just kind of like private show of like it was a posthumous show. So an artist that I knew that had passed away. So we did kind of like a memorial show for them. And then I did a master's in contemporary culture, curating, museum studies. And that was very much kind of hands-on. So going into like places like the Tate and the V&A and what is it called? The British Museum. It's like the Museum. Oh yeah, and the Museum of London. Yeah, and actually talking to a lot of the practitioners there. So whether they were technicians or whether they were curators, arts educators, and just kind of understanding what the whole sector was like, not just within an institution, but also kind of a lot of them had worked independently. Somewhere in the mix there, I did a fine art residency at the gallery like years ago. And that was when I was very much into like kind of photography and yeah.
Wait, in Cayman?
Yeah. So it was before the gallery moved into the new space when they replaced. I did an artist residency and then an exhibition. And after I did my master's, then I kind of submitted a few proposals for exhibitions that were in the making before Corona completely absolutely destroyed all of it.
True.
And then I recently started a PhD, so kind of wanting to bring that practical and theoretical very much side by side, and looking into how to make my practice more socially activated. So not just thinking about, I would say not just thinking about, but kind of going deeper into how do I then be really intentional with being a cultural practitioner and a curator. That's it. I think that's what I did.
True. Well, I don't know. for me, I didn't really finish high school, so I didn't have that typical route from high school to college. I eventually somehow ended up at like a vocational school in London, like an art school, which was then the piggyback that would have got me into school. I got into the University of Edinburgh, but I didn't go. And so that kind of, it's just going like this. And then I eventually kind of came back to Cayman and, felt a little self-defeated. And I was like, is art a thing? And so after a few years, I went back to sort of doing art, and I just started self-taught kind of thing. And about almost 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, I started my practice formally in Cayman. And that's where I started to develop more of the educational side as it kind of sprinkled in. So I recently, a year ago now, COVID just, a year ago.
What is time?
I know. A year ago, I went to Portugal for a residency program at this place called Panelists Studios in Lisbon. And basically I was surrounded by a bunch of artists who had actually, every other person had gone to traditional university for art. So I really used that opportunity to feed off of their knowledge and learn from them. I think artist residency programs are crucial. A lot of them are very particular though, like you have to have a certain style of work that mixes with what their aesthetic is. So if you apply to one, always look at who their previous artists were, because usually you can kind of just say, I look kind of like them, so I have a stronger choice. And it's the same with galleries too. So galleries all over the world, like they have an aesthetic because they have a buyer and they have a clientele. So that's another thing to look into, just jaywalking there. But also, so after the residency in Portugal, I came back, COVID happened. It was, disaster, as we all know. And I was supposed to go to another residency that same year in Aruba called Caribbean Linked. And that didn't happen. And it was supposed to happen this year, like 2 months from now, but it's not happening again. So it's going to happen in 2022. So, it is what it is. And it's just another opportunity, this time regionally, to meet artists like me who work in, our region. Simon Tatum went to the same program, like I think 4 years ago. It was like 2016.
That's 5 years because we're 21. Wow.
Oh, Lord. And then also I'm currently in a sort of quasi-academic program. There's a magazine in the UK called Terps Banana, and it's a really well-known kind of painters magazine. So I'm in a program for that. And I'm going to be doing that for like the next 2 years. And it's kind of like a mentorship program where you have a mentor who kind of gives you feedback on what you're doing. And yeah, so, also grants. I got a grant last November from a program called Catapult, which was like Kingston Creative, Fresh Milk, Barbados, and a few other entities kind of merged together to give grants, and writing grants, performing grants, artist grants, painting, every grant possible to people because of the pandemic. So I was involved in that too. Grants are a very good avenue for artists because it provides you funding pretty quickly if you go through their process, and it allows you to continue making your artwork without needing direct sales from your artwork. So you can just keep making because you're relying on stimulus. So yeah.
There's two things I want to jump at. I know that we kind of run that, well, yeah, coming to time, but the two things which I guess, I don't know if we'll talk about a little bit later, but the first that you mentioned, Reno, was galleries. And I think that it's really crucial to make a distinction between, there's kind of like, you know, there's many types, but like two main types of galleries. You have commercial galleries that represent artists that, you know, like you were talking about, that have a very specific aesthetic, that they kind of represent artists that are quite similar because they have investors and stakeholders that are looking for, you know, kind of the same artwork that kind of, yeah, that is kind of the same, similar. And kind of commercial galleries are a brilliant way of kind of putting your work in, or being represented by a very professional institution or establishment to be able to promote your artwork. And then you have art galleries, you kind of call them both galleries, but then you have art museums, which is, we talk about, like, I guess, like places like the National Gallery here, thinking about the National Gallery Bahamas or Jamaica, Perez Art Museum. So like big arts museums in those sense are not commercial spaces. So they may have like a gift shop, or they may do like fundraisers, or they may give artists the opportunity to sell artwork in the show, but removed from themselves. And that's something that's very different. They're more about the promotion of the art scene in that country or in that space, versus it actually being kind of commercially focused. So those are kind of two big distinctions when you're thinking about you know, whether you want to be a curator, how do you work in those two spaces, because it is quite different work that you would do in those two spaces, or if you want to be an artist, that how you represent or how you are represented in those spaces quite differently. And then the other thing was mentorship, which I don't know, Hannah, we might talk about that a bit later on. But I think that that's one of the most important things, is having people that will mentor you, whether that's through the program that you're doing, Reno, or for me, I've had quite a few different mentors kind of regionally. So within the Caribbean, so thinking about within Jamaica, within Bahamas, within Cayman, that have really invested a lot into kind of developing who I am and my interests. So kind of saying to me, you know, these are the options available to you. These are the routes that you could go down. This is how you go down them. Or just even pointing me in the direction of like, oh, there's this conference coming up. Maybe you should submit a paper for that. And that just being a really good way to network after, you know, you do present at a conference. And I think mentorship is a huge thing, just finding someone and just approaching them and being like, hi, so I really respect you. I respect the work that you do. I think that you're rad. I think you're awesome. Don't know where rad came from. That was really strange. And like, can I speak to you maybe on a one-off basis, or can I kind of come to you and you know, we can email back and forth, just any questions that I have. I think mentorship is a huge thing that can be scary, like how do you approach someone, but it's so beneficial. I can hands down say that I would not be in any of the positions in terms of like who I am as an individual today without the mentors that I've had over the years, and still currently have. I shouldn't say like they haven't gone anywhere, but
yeah, bye.
Don't need you anymore.
Yeah, whatever.
So on that, how do you then approach a mentor, or you know, if there's somebody in the community, I don't know, maybe like yourselves, that somebody would like to approach you to be a mentor, or they want to go through the gallery, because I know the National Gallery also is doing mentorships as well for young Canadians who are interested. Connect also does mentorships. I mean, there's so many different avenues. So how would you go about, you know, if somebody wanted to get in touch with you, or if you were reaching out to a mentor, how would you go about that process?
Go through my agent. I'm sure I'm gonna have no agent.
Yeah.
I guess it's just finding a platform that person is on. So if you know that they're on social media, or if you go to an event and you see them, just kind of networking in the sense of asking them more about themselves, not to kind of heighten their ego, because that's not what it is, but just to know if you're like what your values and your ambitions are, if that lines up with their values and their ambitions in the projects they're working on. A lot of things that I've done in the past is just ask, how can I help? Like, I would write labels if you need someone to write labels. I'll come and do admin, or if you just need someone to like, I don't know, it's just really random things, like not presenting myself as, oh, I'm this great person that I can do these things, but like, how can I help you? And I think that's the biggest thing, is that I think a lot of us within the art scene are busy. There is a lot going on. Like, you wouldn't notice that, but there is so much going on that it's just kind of presenting yourself as an asset, but also saying that you want to learn from them. So I think those two things are really important, of saying, well, is there anything I can help with? Are there any projects that you're currently working on? But then also, you know, what are you working on? And can I ask you some questions? So sending them an email, asking for their phone numbers. Yeah, I think those are, you know, if you have anything else, Reno.
No, you got most of it, I think. Can you remind me the question, Hannah?
Well, yeah, no, I was going to say, how do you reach out to mentors? But something I wanted to add on that actually as well, there are a lot of events at the National Gallery where, I mean, especially like, for example, the biennial, right? If you go to the opening night, or if you go during the day, you'll be able to chat with people within the industry as well. In a less formal setting. It's not as in like an interview setting where you're saying, hi, I would like to be your intern, or like, can you please mentor me? Like, you know, so you get to know the person on a more personal level. And I think creating that connection as well.
Yeah, I think what I would like to add is that I think a lot of instances in business and professionality, we also have to remember that we're artists and creatives. So formality doesn't really necessarily isn't as formal. So if you want to just meet somebody, you just kind of like, if for instance, I have people on Instagram who, you know, are in like major collections and stuff like that. I just send them a message. I don't business about it. I just go, hey man, I really like your stuff. Can I talk to you for like 20 minutes? And we do a call or something. And that's that. And you learn information, because most artists, it's a symbiotic thing. You know, you learn a piece from you, I learn a piece from you, you know, and, you know, just, I think you're right. Like, if you go to the National Gallery, you get some people might get a little intimidated and say, well, oof, you know, like, you know, I want to work here. Like, what do I do? But just go there and have a conversation about what art is, or like what you're interested in, and don't overbear it. You don't walk up and say, like, pull out your phone and be like, oh, I painted this yesterday. What do you think? Like, tell me what you think. Because then they're just gonna be like, aish, because, you know, like, just be yourself. Just relax. You know, like, say hi. How are you? I like art. You like art? Let's get a coffee. You know, I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. Is that not being too formal about it? Because I think, like, so from my experience, but also how I feel now, like, I've approached someone that I really, 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 really respected, and was like, I just want to be like them. They're so great. And like, I'd only seen them at like a few conferences that I'd been to, and like, I'd like followed them on Instagram, and I approached them, was like, hi, can you be my mentor? And they were like, what? What is that? What? And I legit just freaked him out.
Yeah.
And then, like, you know, from my point of view, like, you know, I'm so busy that, like, if someone said to me, like, oh, can you mentor me? I'd be like, in what capacity? Like, how long do you want this to be? Like, what do you want to know from me? Whereas if you ask questions, which is mentoring, just being like, can I ask you a few questions? Can we go to lunch one day, or can we grab a coffee, or just sending a message, be like, oh, I've got this question about this thing. What do you think? Kind of being really casual about it, I think.
True. And, you know, I think that might actually, I think that might actually apply. I think that might actually apply to like most businesses, I think, in my opinion, because I mean, unless it's from a professional standpoint, like let's say you're going to like a meeting and you're discussing serious stuff and you're like all suited up and tied up and whatever, like that. Okay, fine. That's a different thing. But like, let's say there's someone in the industry that you met at like a social thing that you just thought was really intellectual or etc. And you just hit them up and say, hey, how are you? Like, I found what you said was, riveting, and I'd love to get to know you. Like, love to understand how you work the way you work. I don't think that you need to put a lot of, it's, I don't know. I think about, yeah.
Yeah, you don't need to put a lot of pressure on yourself in that sense.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, we're all
people.
And have our own personalities, right? So what we might be doing in a workplace setting, just like Reno said, how it goes across all industries. I mean, it goes for anyone really, right? So for example, if you're at a conference and then the next day you're like, I really liked what he said, like I want to send him a message, but you're like, should I send him a message? Should I not? Just do it. Like, just say, I loved what you said about this topic. Would you mind, like, are you happy to grab a coffee? And like most of the time, like 90% of the time, they will say yes. If they say no, it's probably because they're busy and they have too many things going on at the moment, but that doesn't mean no for the future, right? So just take that chance, take the leap and message somebody. And it really does open so many doors. I think that's definitely.
Yeah. Can I coin the term business friendships?
Oh yeah.
Because because look, if you become friends with people you work with to an extent, not keep professional people, but if you become friends with people, it allows for like an ability to share information, and then they might say, my friend does this or my friend does that. And I mean, that's the way it works in the art world. You become friends with somebody and then they say, yo, my friend runs a gallery down the street, or blah, 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 blah. I don't know how it works in, the business world, but.
I think that's all networking, right? So all different kinds of networking. And that's just one aspect of it. So,
True.
Yeah. And I think one last thing. One thing that, kind of now stepping into the side of like being kind of in the academic side of things and, doing research, that you may say, oh, well, that person's doing this thing. And like, that's like, well, for me doing a PhD, I'm like, okay, yeah, it's pretty intense, but like, I don't see it as this thing like, oh, I'm on this pedestal. It's like, no, I'm just kind of researching some stuff. And I find that like, when I've had conversations with people that are, so there's, I had a chat with someone recently that is, I think they're in their second year of university. And I actually found that really helpful for me, for my, like, so it's this thing, like you were saying, and I think both of you were actually saying that, is like that symbiotic relationship that you learn from that it's a really good chance not to show off like, oh yeah, well, this is who I am and like I've done these things, but just being like, oh yeah, well, I did this thing and like this might be interesting, or I came across this random article, but then also like learning from, and that's essentially, as individuals, that we learn from each other. Monkey see, monkey do, more or less.
True.
Such a professional term, obviously.
Yeah. Fine arts.
So we're gonna wrap it up in a few. So I just wanted to open the floor to any of the attendees who wanted to ask questions. Feel free to put it in the chat box. You can also put it in the Q&A section as well. The floor is yours, so feel free to ask any questions you may have. If you want follow-ups on any of the topics that both Reno and Kerri-Anne were talking about, feel free to put those there in as well. I have one last question before I let you go. But if you could give a piece of advice to somebody looking to get their career started within the arts, what would you say to them? You can take a minute.
That takes a second.
I think for me, the thing is trust your intuition. Find that thing that, and this is going to sound really airy-fairy, but that thing that sets your soul on fire. And so for me, kind of thinking about, the journey that I took to get where I am was because of all of the uncertainties that I felt in terms of creating or understanding my identity as a mixed race Caribbean person that lives in a post-colonial world but still in a colony. And that was something that I was always thinking of, like, who am I? What trying to figure all of that out. And that's kind of now come full circle to like that's the thing that drives me. The more that I understand it, the more passionate I am about having conversations and instigating those conversations and dialogues through the arts. So I'd say find that, and that becomes your niche in a sense. Like, I mean, you don't necessarily need a niche, but like that thing that kind of sets you apart is the thing that you feel, you know, strongly in your gut of like, I'm really passionate about just sculpture and form. And, you know, maybe that's the thing that you go into is just, you know, working with art and working with materials and building things that just kind of happen into other things. That would kind of be my first bit of advice.
What was the question?
If you could
advice.
You just got lost in what Kerri-Anne was saying. I was the advice was what recommendation would you give to somebody who is looking to get their career started within the arts? Or like what piece of advice would you give someone?
Just do it. I don't think there's anything you can say, because everybody's journey is going to be different. Because you develop as an artist. You never really, it's not like other businesses where like, you know, like let's say you're making an iPhone. There's a way to make an iPhone, you know. Art, there's a million different ways, and there will always be different ways to do something. There will always be different contexts. So just jump in, do it, and just if something's not working, try something else, because you can always do any. I was talking to one of my mentors the other day, and he was like, don't just think about painting as your only thing. Do anything that you want. Just make sure that it is all cohesive. So just figure out who you are as a person first, and then you should be able to do anything. So just do it.
And also research, like have a look at what's happening globally, regionally, in the diaspora. Like think about, you know, where you sit into that picture, and just go to websites like hyperallergic, I can never say that word, hyperallergic, and and go to the Tate site and go to Perez Art Museum. Like just go to online and look at different things, just look at what's happening, because that's how you know, kind of keep yourself up to date.
True.
I see we've got 2 questions.
Oh, there's questions.
So first one is, when just starting out, what do you think is the best beginning process of getting your art displayed at places like the National Gallery, other than social media? So what's the best process to...
Kerri, that's you, not me. I don't work there.
Yeah, I think when starting out is, a lot of it is networking, like with what Reno was saying, is finding out like, are there any pop-up exhibitions that you can get involved in? Are there any like art fairs that are coming up that you can get involved? So like kind of looking to see what's happening. There isn't a plethora, like there isn't like a bucket load of things that are happening. So it's not going to be that difficult to find out kind of what's happening. But then also, so thinking about getting art displayed in the National Gallery is to look for opportunities like artist call outs. So
like the biennial.
Yeah, like the biennial, we do have different call outs sometimes for different exhibitions. So kind of keeping that on your radar. And then also like, you know, if you know a space that is up for rent, and this is something that like I've been saying to people that I used to do when I was in the UK, is if you know a space is up for rent and it's been empty for years or months, maybe approach the owner and be like, hey, can I have a one-night exhibition with some friends of mine, and we pay you a reduced rent for that period of time that we would be using the space. And a lot of people will, I mean, I haven't tried it in Cayman yet, but I think this is something I kind of would like to see more of, is, you know, it brings traffic into that space for other people that are maybe thinking of investing and wanting to start a business in that space. Kind of thinking of ways to network with artists and what's happening, but call outs as well.
Yeah, I agree.
Another question here: which artist has influenced you the most? What would you say?
Ooh.
That question is pretty much impossible for me to answer. I think just because I've grown up in a multicultural society. I've been influenced by so many different things. I listen to like every genre of music. I look at every style of art. Most of the artwork that I collect in my house are watercolors, watercolors of like scenes of Cayman life. And, you know, I paint abstract stuff and I break up my paintings. So does that make any sense? Probably not. So I don't think I can necessarily say like, yeah, one person, but no, I don't know how to do that. But I think I'm heavily influenced by a lot of people who work in the field of sort of conceptual work. So like great artists like Marcel Duchamp, who to me just never made any sense. So, you know, like he just broke a lot of conceptions of what art was. So to me, people like that, I put on a pedestal.
Yeah, I think that I think kind of that's a trend, well, not a trend, but that's kind of the era that we're in now, is kind of thinking about conceptual art. So a lot of the artists that I was thinking about are conceptual artists. I'd say my at the moment, the artist that kind of stands out is Kara Walker, because I've been kind of following her work. I'll type it in the chat. And then I know that there was another question. But yeah, so I'd say Kara Walker, just because she looks a lot at like the legacies that are that come out of the transatlantic slave trade. She looks a lot at Black identity. She is African American, so a lot of the stuff that she looks at is based on the US. But I think that there's a lot that we can apply kind of regionally. There are so many regional artists that I'm really inspired by. But yeah, I think Kara kind of stands out for me.
So, okay, there you go. Yeah, Reno has put in the chat as
yeah. Theaster Gates is probably my favorite.
Artist. Yeah,
and also Michael Armitage, and I also really like Frank Bowling. And I mean, I like okay, so I'm gonna start talking about a million people. So there you go.
The individual actually followed up with that question. So. It was more so, which artist first made you interested in the arts?
Oh.
I know that's probably just as difficult, but if you could think about somebody who really was like, wow, okay, now I want to start getting into the arts.
This is a strange one, because I have never been a painter, never. And I appreciate you, Reno. I've always been into weird stuff, like making things that look like skin and hanging them on a wall, and people being like, what is it? That's why I didn't practice art, because I was like, nobody's gonna buy this, I go be poor. But I would say actually Randy Chalette, so a local artist. And I remember being in high school and being like, what? There's someone locally that paints like this? Like, yeah.
I think for me, it was probably Picasso, because it's just like, you know, he's so well versed in like every grain of society in terms of being an art in the arts. I think I grew up with my mom having a print of a Picasso drawing over my crib. So I just, you know, as cliche as that sounds, and like my whole life of literally, it was just Picasso, because everybody knew who Picasso was, you know, even in Cayman, little old Cayman, everyone knew who Picasso was. So I would say Picasso first, and then Basquiat second. And then I went down a rabbit hole of like people like Joseph Beuys and all of the people who were like in the Fluxus movement, who were just like really weird. They like crack eggshells on each other's heads. So it kind of just went from like, oh, Picasso to.
I'm going to type an artist in the thing, Egon Schiele, and I can't remember how to spell his name. But if you type on Egon, he has like these really interesting.
Oh, yes.
And then, oh, hi, Tyra. So I know that we haven't answered a question by Makeda about digital art in Cayman. And I think that there are not a lot of artists that practice. So I know that Tyra, I think so. I haven't caught up with you in a while. But I know that there are a few artists that are working in the digital, kind of like digital arts. And I would definitely say that there is a huge potential to see that grow. And also because of, you know, because of the platform in terms of like, I mean, because of how we are now, that everything is virtual, and the pandemic has kind of heightened that and kind of sped a lot of that up, that I think that there is a lot of that's actually happening in the digital arts globally, and kind of seeing that come to Cayman, I think is a really exciting thing. There are a few artists in the biennial currently at the gallery.
Yeah, true.
That have done some really magnificent.
Brandon Saunders, yeah.
And Michael Moden, and yeah, so there's some exciting things that are happening.
I think Christina Pineda's thing was a digital work as well.
Yeah.
And then also what just happened with NFTs. I mean, who knows if that's just like a, fad or something, but I mean, digital art is such a wide spectrum. It's kind of like the spectrum of physical art. And I mean, you could go from doing illustrations for, magazines to digital online adverts, stuff like that, or you could be making like video games, or you could be making NFTs, like, it's like so much you could do with it. So I do agree. I think there is a huge market for it, especially in Cayman, where I think that some of our adverts are kind of, let's say uninspired. So I think that there is a market for very talented digital artists to, make their wave, if that's the style of artwork that you want to make, or if you want to make, I mean, what's the Pascal does digigital stuff. He has some,
yeah.
Like some illustration stuff.
I think so, yeah. And as you were talking, Ashton, I was thinking that there's, and
Dreddy.
In Dreddy, yeah. And Tyra said that in her question. There's actually, and I was thinking there's, if you were to maybe see if you could put a call out, like how they did the exhibition on sexuality the other day, just having a call out of artists that want to submit something on this theme, but maybe saying you want to bring together artists, whether that's like organizing like a digital exhibition or online exhibition, and doing a call out for artists. I know there's quite a few artists that maybe some that you don't even know that are practicing in digital that just kind of, that's not something they could step into. But then kind of that segueing into Tyra's question about how do you balance showing people your work and feeling that it's not resolved yet, and that kind of goes back to what you were saying, Reno, that your work is always developing, it's always changing, it's always, and actually I think showcasing your work is such an important way of developing your practice, developing your vocabulary, your visual vocabulary. And I think that it's just finding spaces that, whether it's through like a call out from the National Gallery, if there's an artist call out, or whether that's like organizing something small, or contacting Parcel 110 and
and me,
or and that's actually something we haven't spoken about, I think, which is really exciting.
True. Yeah, so I guess I'm a curator, sort of, so to speak, of a gallery that's now open in town called Parcel 110. We're going to be doing a lot of open calls over the next few months, and the whole purpose of the space is to kind of facilitate younger artists or emerging artists who want that sort of next step into a more professional setting, and also just allowing them a space to kind of flourish and give a little bit of feedback. Because like what Kerri was saying, I think constructive criticism is probably the most important thing in any artist's career, because, I don't know how to say what I want to say politically correct, so I'm not going to say it, but, it's about, you need that sort of regurgitation of someone saying, well, what about this? What about this? What about this? And it kind of makes you think, because our role as artists isn't just to make one thing over and over and over again and make a masterpiece over and over again. The role of artists is to continue to think and push a boundary or like a limitation. So I think that constructive criticism allows you that sort of break from your ego of being like, well, I just made a masterpiece. And then someone goes, well, what about, I mean, Kerri does that to me all the time, so.
But kind of, I think what you were trying to say, Reno, is, and I kind of, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that I very much feel this is that, there needs to be spaces outside of the National Gallery for artists to be able to exhibit their work. And those spaces would then enable more of those conversations. Because if you think about like a national institution, this is kind of where like the cream of the crop. Okay, that sounds really bad.
Yeah, but so to speak, yeah.
You have had those conversations about your work, and your work develops and changes over time. And you kind of sit comfortably between, I kind of know what I want to say as an artist and where I'm going, that's kind of, you know, when you would then exhibit it at the National Gallery within spaces like that. But I think there needs to be a lot more local grassroots places, and grassroots not really the word, but, you know, local smaller places, not smaller in the sense of significance, but places where you can develop your practice as an artist. So yeah, I think Parcel 110 is a brilliant, and actually a good example and a promo for Parcel 110 is when we were looking at the biennial, there are a few pieces that, there's one piece in particular that as we were kind of going through the judges and the curatorial team, or the jury and the curatorial team were considering, you know, are there any gaps within the work that's been presented? And actually, you know, one of the artists having their exhibition there helped us to be able to say, oh, well, actually, you know, this is a young artist, the first time that they exhibited, and we think that their work's really strong, and we think that it would be a great addition into the biennial. Yeah, and I spent a month. He did a residency program next door to me at my studio for a month, and I spent the whole month giving him constructive criticism the entire month. Every week I'd go in there and we do a group. It's called a group crit, but it was really just me and him. So it was more just like me and him critiquing each other. Well, and so I would just tell him what I was working on. He'd give me feedback. I tell him what he was working on, give him feedback. And so me and him co-curated the show and put it up. And that was his first ever show. He's like 19 years old. You know, shout out to Ian McRae. Congrats. And immediately afterwards, he's in the National Gallery for the biennial show. So it is possible, I think. It's just, again, you know, how far you're willing to push yourself, and just keeping flexible, and just doing it. I mean, when he came, he was like, well, you know, I kind of know what I want to do. And I was like, well, just do it. And then he just did it. And, you know, it was, I think, yeah, just the jumping off point is the point where you kind of just give into it. And I think that, you know, showing someone your work and being like, well, they're just going to put me down. I think that that's something that stems from our society as well. And that's a deeper issue, but find a good support circle of people that you trust, who will give you constructive criticism, positive feedback, as opposed to just bashing you. I think that that's another very important thing, because we live in a very conservative society where people will just bash you. They'll be like, well, that's not business or finance. So, you know, so you have to be very careful who you show your stuff to. But at the same time, there are people out there. I mean, if you want to come talk to me about it, just come knock on my door. I'll talk to you about it. And I'm not gonna judge you, so don't worry. I live north side, so you won't find my door. But I just wanted to add to that, and I know that we've run over time, is exposure. And it's whether that's locally, regionally, internationally, it's exposure. Getting your work out, but also understanding what's out there, understanding the potential that you have, and taking on that critical feedback, that critical criticism. What is it? Constructive criticism. I couldn't find it. Yes. And then using that to develop yourself, I think, yeah, absolutely.
Well, I think is there one more question here?
Is there?
I think that, somebody asked if they want to start beginner illustrations. Do you know of any places that they can take?
YouTube, it's free.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
But then there's places kind of similar to the that magazine that you were talking about, where you're doing your training, Reno. So there's online places that you can go that are credited, and yeah, everything is online more or less. So there's a lot of.
Oh, what's that one? Skillshare. You could go on Skillshare.
Yes, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Skillshare. There's the other one. There's a lot of these like online vocational things that are very cheap. I think some of them are next to nothing. They're free. But some of them you pay like
Coursera.
Yeah, those things, they have all of that information, because I used them for a little bit at the very beginning as well, for like color theory and stuff like that. So yeah, the online resources are very, very, very useful.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's so much out there online now. You may as well use what you have before going to pay for, you know, a class, right? I mean, I'm learning how to draw now because I have a toddler at home, so I have to learn how to draw a cat and a dog, you know, so like little things that I'll like learn on YouTube or like go to Google Images and do one step, second step, things like that. But definitely nowhere near the level of the two of you. But yeah, I think that's everything for today. If you do want to reach out to either Reno or Kerri-Anne, I mean, I'm sure you'll probably see them out and about somewhere. Reno's studio is at Parcel 110 in Georgetown. Kerri-Anne's up in Northside, so you won't find her, but you can find her. You can find
I'll be at the National Gallery.
Yeah,
at the National Gallery.
From May onwards.
Yeah, or on Instagram as well. They both have Instagram pages and social media. So please be sure to follow them and keep up with their careers. And if you have any questions going forward, I'm sure they're more than welcome to answer them, or you can always go through me and I can ask them as well if you want to remain anonymous. But thank you everyone so much for coming to today's session. The next Ask the Expert series will be in May, last week of May, and it'll be on US tax. So that's an interesting topic, very different from today's.
Riveting.
Right? So we do have a lot of other trainings in between then. We'll be doing like a resume writing, a LinkedIn page, everything in between. So please be sure to follow Connect as well on our socials to keep up to date, because all of these are free of charge and they're open to all of you to join. But that's it for everyone. So thank you so much. If there are any final remarks the two of you want to say before I let you go, I know we went a little over, but being here.
I saw in the comment that Hillary has a favorite Picasso painting, and I'm pretty sure I saw that in person at the Tate. Have you ever seen that one at the Tate? I think it's in the Tate.
I haven't seen it in person.
The Desmodels. It's like that pink and the famous one, you know?
Yeah.
Oh, it's in the MoMA now. Oh, it moved. Wow, or is it always in the MoMA? Oh no, it was a print. Hannah, remember? We saw it.
Yes.
We saw it. It was a.
But two things I wanted to say. One is Mary actually spoke about this. So getting involved with art-related events and associations. So like the Visual Art Society or VAS that have been around for a long time, pop-up markets, Ponciana, those are really brilliant ways to get exposure. And oh, I forgot what I was going to, oh yeah, the last thing that I think that, you know, kind of comparing Reno and I and our journeys and our interests is that not everyone's journey is going to look the same. Not everyone's, like, even if, you know, I wanted to eventually go into fine art, that like my journey would look very different, obviously, than somebody else. And I think that it's not about copying, but taking bits on to say like, oh, well, I really like how this person does that. And, you know, I really admire this. And yeah, just not kind of knocking yourself because, well, actually, you know, I've been doing something for like 5 years and no one likes it, or, you know, it's yeah, everyone's journey is different and it doesn't make it less valid.
Oh, so you sent it, Reno, you sent it to the panelists, so I guess I'll copy and paste and send it.
Oh, it's really interesting.
Yeah, no, because remember they had a show on Picasso on paper and they couldn't actually fly the work over because it's worth like $1 bajillion. So I remember that now. That was, yeah, COVID times. Yeah, I forgot.
Yeah, I think that was the last show before.
Yeah, it was the last show before lockdown.
Yeah. The only people with masks on.
Yeah.
Interesting times, but we could talk about that all day. But I'll let you all go. Thank you so much, the two of you, for being here for the session. It was so informative. I'm sure everyone really got an idea of the different ways they could get into the arts. I mean, you two have very different journeys. And like you said, Kerri-Anne, no one's journey is the same.